Good horror is hard. Yeah, you can find yourself some rules, I've certainly tried, but ultimately it only works when you have new ways to subvert expectations, find uniqueness in something old, or just make something out of nothing. I understand being frustrated with bad episodes or media in general, but I'd say it's much more efficient to use them as learning rather than just dogging on them. So that's what I did. I've said a lot of good things about Black Mirror recently, and haven't said a lot of good things about Black Mirror that I wanted to say because I just haven't had the right time to. However, like anything horror related, the line between pure art and confusing boredom is about as thin as a fast food hamburger bun. Because it's so great pretty often, it kind of forces itself down a path of being really bad when it fails, not just because of comparison. This all led me to the actual video itself, where I talk about 2 episodes of Black Mirror I didn't really love. There are a few ones that I haven't seen, which I think would work well in a video like this, like Metalhead, which seems kind of boring, Smithereens, which I've heard basically nothing about, and Maisie Day, which makes me want to have an aneurysm every time I read the plot description. But I ended up picking the 2 that I liked the least. For the record, I think that these are both fun TV show episodes that are well directed, have good acting, and great visual design like all Black Mirror episodes, but in terms of storytelling, they don't work. So without further ado, put away the damn phone and let's get straight into analysing Striking Vipers and Rachel, Jack and Ashley 2. Rachel, Jack and Ashley 2 is about Rachel and Ashley 2, and kind of about Jack. Rachel is a loner who has a celebrity role model, Ashley. Rachel's home life is pretty bad since her mother is dead, her sister is kind of mean, and her dad is really epic but in a geeky kind of way. However, Rachel gets a fantastic gift for Christmas, Ashley 2. She's an artificial recreation of Ashley for the fans to hang out with if they don't know what character AI is. Rachel makes good friends with Ashley too, which her dad is annoyed by, especially when she's booed off stage during a talent competition after messing up to an Ashley song. He then decides to confiscate the toy, much to Rachel's dismay. Anyways, during all of this, the real Ashley wants to be more edgy, and so a producer/aunt drugs her into a coma. Oh, ow! Sorry, the tone just whiplashed me. Back to the A-plot, the father gives back Ashley 2 after hearing about the coma, but Rachel's past it at this point. That is until her sister Jack tries to fix a glitch in her system, deleting a limitation and bringing out the real Ashley. Turns out, Ashley 2 is literally a copy of Ashley who's been stuffed inside a machine, with limitations placed on so she doesn't act out. This actually convinces the girls to find evidence in her house, and so they drive there. They actually find Ashley, and so they start coming up with a plan to bring her back and wake her up, and then Ashley 2 unplugs her life support to get her out of her misery. But then, plot twist, turns out the machine was keeping her comatose, and now she wakes up, and then they drive to a convention with producer lady making a speech, and she gives her the middle finger, and then Ashley is playing a rock song in the credits, and Jack is playing bass, and are you catching my drift? This episode just kind of happens. There's almost no rhyme or reason to it, something that is really important, especially in a moral-oriented series like Black Mirror. Take White Christmas. All of the major plot points in that episode either tie to the main theme of justice, build the characters, or effectively shock the audience. Each beat was specifically crafted to make a stroke of the big picture that it was trying to get across. This not only creates a more rewarding watch, but also makes the episode more memorable. I could go in depth on this and many other Black Mirror episodes if someone randomly asked me on the street about it, but I had to go to Wikipedia to get the plot description for Rachel, Jack and Ashley 2, since I just straight up forgot what happened. Another thing that makes this episode falter is how upbeat it is. Now, Black Mirror episodes don't need psychological horror or even a dark tone to work, take San Junipero or Hang the DJ, but there does need to be the threat of things not working out. A lot of Black Mirror episodes do not have happy endings, so the idea that the characters you're getting used to are going to become slaves to technology is always a viable threat. Except in this episode because the tone is just too exciting. There's a lot of wackiness, Disney-esque plot points, and humour which makes it seem like the episode isn't going to do a 180 on all of that, despite the cruelty of producer lady, I refuse to learn her name. Alongside this, the technology doesn't really break enough barriers for there to be the belief that the writers could creatively use it. We all know about virtual clones, mind-reading devices, and artificial intelligence. What does this episode have to offer that we can't get anywhere else? Now, these aren't the worst things in the world. Sometimes it can be nice to watch an adventure story with some self-insert teens and dark undertones. But that's not what people are going to expect in Black Mirror. You can't offer someone a Halloween special and give them Paw Patrol, even if that Paw Patrol isn't bad. This episode fails because it can't decide on whether it wants to change the tide, being a more optimistic episode, or if it wants to be generic Black Mirror, putting it in an incredibly uncomfortable state of limbo. Moving on, we have Striking Vipers. If you've seen this episode, you know what we're getting into. If you haven't, buckle up. There are 3 important characters in Striking Vipers: Danny, Danny's girlfriend Theo, and Danny's best friend Carl. Danny and Theo are introduced, have a great relationship, and end each day happy as clams. Then Danny and Carl play Super Smash Bros, Street Fighters, Mortal Kombat, Striking Vipers, to the dismay of Theo's sleep schedule. After an 11-year time skip, Danny and Theo are married and have kind of fallen out of touch with Carl. However, on Danny's birthday, they meet back up, just like the old days. In fact, just like the old days, since Carl gives Danny Striking Viper's X's present, an immersive remake of the game played with VR technology that fully takes you inside the game. Body, senses, pain, the whole shebang. It's actually the same technology from USS Callister if that interests you. That night, once back at their homes, they play the game together, Danny playing as his main Lance, and Carl playing as his main Roxette. They fight and so on, and then they start making out. Danny and Carl are clearly very shocked with each other, and then they both leave the game quite quickly. They give it a rest for a bit, before trying again and... oh, come on, you didn't even start fighting this time. Keep in mind, Danny has a wife and child, and Carl has a girlfriend. These aren't points away from the episode, but they are definitely things to keep in mind. They continue this for a while, getting more and more, intimate. This makes Danny a bit less, affectionate with Theo, which takes a bit of a toll on her since they're trying to have another kid. Theo starts thinking Danny's having an affair. He says he isn't, and tells Carl to pack it all up. Anyways, another time skip, Danny's birthday again, and wouldn't you know it, Carl's the surprise guest. What fun. They have dinner, and once Theo leaves the room, Carl immediately starts talking about how he hasn't been, intimate with any other characters or players.
I fucked a polar bear, and I still couldn't get you out of my mind.
What the hell is happening? So they go back, try again, and then after Carl says, I love you, stuff just gets too weird for Danny, and they decide to make out in real life. They both try it out and agree it doesn't feel the same as it did in-game. Carl still wants to be, close while playing Striking Vipers though, to which Danny disagrees, and they get in a fight about it. A physical one. Oh, I know where this is going. Oh, never mind, a cop finds them and arrests them both. Theo eventually picks up Danny, very annoyed, and he caves in, telling her about everything that's happened. To this, she has a plan. What if they keep doing that stuff, and she goes to the bar without her wedding ring to cheat on him? He accepts this offer. The end. Okay, so that was a hell of a ride. I was pretty well aware of the plot before this, which gave me a kind of protective barrier, but I could not imagine what someone who just put it on unknowingly would think of it. Anyways, I do want to mention some positives first. The lighting is fantastic, it tells the story is reminiscent of those dark VR rooms, and generally just looks really appealing. I also reckon Theo is a pretty great character for the majority of the episode. I do like the idea of how technology can affect romance. Is it real intimacy if it's done virtually? Was Danny attracted to his friend at all, or just the female avatar? Were Danny and Carl making exceptions because it's not really real? I think the ideas are really interesting, even if they aren't Black Mirror's usual forte. There is a real use of moral dilemmas here, something that's used in a lot of psychological horror, but not all too much anywhere else. The reason that they aren't used too much anywhere else is because they always have consequences, something mostly exclusive to horror or just kind of depressing films. And here is where the main drawback of Striking Vipers comes. The episode isn't real psychological horror, it's more of a thought experiment. Danny does some pretty bad things in this episode, lying to his wife, debatably cheating on her, ignoring his wife, and beating up his best friend. However, he seems to face little to no repercussions for any of these things, just because of the agreement that's made right at the end, and that feels really off to me. I kind of feel like he should have lost something by the end of this if the story was going to be more plot-focused and less world-focused. Maybe Theo divorces him, or his friendship doesn't work out, or maybe he disregards a personal value for his antics. As is, the episode doesn't even touch on these things, which feels really off for Black Mirror, one of the most justice-themed shows of all time. Either the good guys win, or the bad guys win, and everything is worse. Alongside the moral dilemma issues, Striking Vipers' other main issue is the fact that it doesn't expand upon its idea. When I was first told about the plot of Striking Vipers, I was actually really interested. It's mixing the stagnant and designable idea of digital technology and mixing it with the unpredictability of romance. I wondered where they could take the idea, either with how the characters' feelings affect the use of technology, or technology affecting the characters' feelings. The problem is that they don't do this. The first scene of the characters making out is enough to tell exactly where the plot is going, right up until the ending. This obviously isn't great, because why watch something when you know how it's going to pan out? But it once again goes against some of the pretty good rules Black Mirror sets for itself. Most episodes are completely unpredictable. White Christmas, White Bear, Black Museum, Shut Up and Dance, all of these episodes have mind-blowing twists that people talk about to this day, and even if it doesn't have that, the central idea is built upon in interesting ways. Striking Vipers does none of this with the technology aspect, and the emotion doesn't fare much better, only having that one interesting scene at the end. Striking Vipers isn't the worst thing in the world, it has a lot of good aspects, but it just seems to say far too little with a premise as interesting as this, and presents moral dilemmas that only go halfway. So, what am I trying to get at here? Well, a few things, but mainly I'm trying to demonstrate how easily dystopian horror media can go wrong. The mistakes these episodes make for the most part are easy to make mistakes. It's difficult to expand the idea of striking vipers, and the editing could have worked really well if they'd added some kind of missing ingredient. Rachel, Ashley 2 and a little bit of Jack didn't really do anything explicitly wrong other than the tone, and it's still considered to be one of the worst Black Mirror episodes ever made. I just think that there are very few rules when writing dystopian horror, but breaking them ruins the entire experience for most people. So, I made a list of 3 rules that I found from writing this. Are these all of them? No. Are these perfect? Probably not. But I think they're generally pretty good, and they've appeared in a lot of these things, almost like a kind of pattern. So without further ado, the first one is holding back. All things horror have a chance of getting popular. Once they get popular, the media is shown to a wider audience. Wider audiences have a higher chance of including kids or teens or anything like that. Once kids learn about something scary, they become obsessed with it, and suddenly there's a brand new market ready and waiting to be appealed to. This results in the media being watered down for this new market, which everyone agrees sucks. You can see examples in how everyone disliked the story of FNAF's security breach, or how there are now so many calling Slenderman at 3 AM, or calling Huggy Wuggy at 3 AM, or, I don't know, calling the bank at 4:15. RJAAT is the clearest example of this. It feels like a Disney Channel Black Mirror ripoff at points. The best artworks usually aren't affected by societal norms or financial gain. This doesn't mean that they have to break these rules or go against these incentives, but does mean that when it explicitly does get affected by these things, it becomes less pure. In order to create a great story, you have to prioritize the story above all else. While similar to holding back, the second rule I have is about unoriginality. With something as popular and conceptual as horror sci-fi, it is very important to make sure your work is distinct from anything else. People don't like most jump scares because they've been all done before. People don't like a lot of artificial intelligence because wasn't that already in this movie? Striking Vipers falls into this a little bit with its lack of technology expansion, similar to Ray, Jack and Ash 2 with its artificial intelligence. These two aren't really generic in the horror aspect, which is good, even if this is mostly because they have almost no horror. This rule is arguably the most important for 2 reasons. First, it's quite easy to spot, but quite hard to fix. Generally speaking, it's easier to take than to make, and apologies mean nothing when people are just getting the same tired words that just want to be put out of their misery. Anyways, reason number 2 is that it is so easy to fall into. The best ideas have already been taken, so try going where your mind refuses to wander. Finally, we have endings. I'm a firm believer in the theory that endings make or break a story and are far more important than those slimy beginnings or middles. They say it's about the journey, not the destination, but the destination can make the story seem like it was all for nothing. Obviously, Striking Vipers is the best example of this, as I've been talking about before. Great horror is naturally very theme-heavy, and is always trying to get a moral across. Saw movies are about the importance of life. It is about the way fear controls us. Black Mirror is about humanity for the most part. The ending decides what stance the media is on about the themes, and it has its best chance to convince you right there, since that's when the brutality usually rears its ugly head. Endings are what tell the audience what to take away from the episode, /TV show, /film, and so nailing them is absolutely vital. Anyways, those were the 3 I came up with. I think they fit in most scenarios, and they're there if you want to use them. If you have any more, feel free to comment them. Anyways, this is the end of the video, something I've been studying for. Generally, horror is very easy to get wrong. Even one of my favourite TV shows of all time messes up this genre. And I don't think we should be too harsh. Yes, there are some very simple rules to follow, but they're so easily broken when moving past them requires a lot of brainstorming, removing ideas, reworking, and finally presenting cohesively. It is a miracle every time great dystopian horror releases, so a blemish or 2 isn't the worst thing in the world. I can see the argument that great output is the expectation, which is pretty fair, but I'm willing to take a few bad episodes when you have masterpieces like White Christmas, Nosedive, and USS Callister waiting around the corner, not to mention all other horror that people can watch. So, yep, I really enjoyed talking about Black Mirror, and while I might give it a rest for a while, I'll definitely be talking about more episodes in the future. If you enjoyed, feel free to dislike, that's right, expectations subverted, take that, viewer! Anyways, hope you enjoyed, call the effing supervisor, cue the outro music.